A few days ago, I made a couple of videos on why Ethan Winters is Resident Evil's most relatable hero, while his wife Mia is Resident Evil's perfect villain. Both of them well received, and for that, I'm extremely grateful to God and to you, the viewers. But now, it's time to end this trilogy off with their daughter Rose. And whether you think she's a character with great potential, or someone who's going to fade in silent obscurity, there's no denying the struggles and sacrifices she had to endure just to survive the supernatural situations she was forced into. Born as a bioweapon and feared by others as a freak, she never made her origins dictate her life. So please join me as we discuss how Rose Winters is Resident Evil's greatest life lesson. The Resident Evil series is nearly 30 years old, and I can't think of any game that put a lot of time into building up a character's backstory. We're used to strong soldiers like Chris and Jill, people who just happen to get wrapped up in bioterrorism like Claire and Leon, or superhuman villains like Albert Wesker. But as iconic as these characters are, their backstories were nothing more than flavor text, often simmering on the back burner for the sake of plot. And as much as I would love to see them fully fleshed out, sadly that isn't the case. But to choose a more detailed way of storytelling with Rose, someone whose greatest ambition is just getting through high school, is something I didn't think anyone was expecting. So when I first played Rose's story, for the life of me I couldn't figure out why she wanted to get rid of her powers, especially when it's seen in action. But it wasn't just about her powers, it was deeper than that. And as I fell further into the rabbit hole, I began to understand her motives and choices, and why she thought the way she did. And just as there's beauty in the eye of the beholder, what is seen as a gift to some is a curse to others. And judging from her school experience, her classmates made that choice for her with their relentless bullying and borderline abuse for something that was clearly out of her control. As a kid, Rose's powers manifested in the form of white sweat in the palms of her hands, already putting her at odds with the other children. And that alone was enough to make her a freak in their eyes. And whether or not they knew anything about her condition means nothing at the end of the day. I don't mean to make it too deep, but growing up, we were taught that having moles is a possible sign for skin cancer. And as someone with a large mole on the side of my face, I was called Cancer Kid by the other children, among other names, while being ostracized because they assumed cancer was contagious. Of course, this isn't a pity party table for one, but I do understand where Rose is coming from, because you don't have to teach children how to be cruel. Is it because it comes naturally to them? Or is it because they don't fully understand the trauma it inflicts on others? But her struggles began long before she could say her first word. Because in the eyes of Mother Miranda, Rose was a lot more valuable, but still nothing more than a test subject to revive her dead daughter Ava. To be given life just to switch places with someone in death is a cruel fate no one should endure, but focusing on one's goal for over 100 years would harden anyone's heart, even towards an innocent baby. But as dark and twisted as Miranda was, she's not the only one at fault here, because her own mother was the start of her problems. In Resident Evil 7, Mia became infected with the mold while working with the Connections, a crime syndicate involved in bioterrorism. And though she survived, her past was always looming over her, waiting for the chance to haunt her baby's future. And for just being born, it solidified her connection to Ava and Evelyn, to Miranda, a perfect host, and to the government, a perfect weapon. From what we've seen through Jack Baker, Evelyn, Miranda, and even her father Ethan, the mold grants the user various powers, from regeneration to superhuman strength, shapeshifting, and even mind control. And if given the chance, I doubt any of us would give that up just to become a normal human being. And I'm sure many players thought Rose was stupid for wanting to purge herself of such potential, especially in the relentless world of Resident Evil, where breathing in the wrong air at the wrong place at the wrong time could lead to a citywide infection of man-eating viruses. But it's hard to appreciate these benefits when you're seen as nothing more than a monster, something Evelyn is all too familiar with. In my last video, I explained her upbringing as cold and calculated by the Connections. And even though she was a weapon to be used, she was never seen as the little girl she was. And from that, she became the powerful weapon they've always wanted, but landed in her line of sight in the process. As dangerous and detrimental as she was to those around her, things could have turned out a lot differently if Evelyn was treated like a normal human being. After taking her out in RE7, you would have thought she was laid to rest. But no, you can feel her misery and madness manifest well beyond her death as she tries to take out Rose with murderous intent.
No one loves you. And when you're dead, no one will care!
And considering that Rose doesn't know who Evelyn is, it's clear she's still left in the dark by those around her. But Evelyn is well aware of who Rose is through their shared connection of the mode, and now facing a person who had the one thing she always wanted, a warm, loving family, while she watches through her cold, empty prison of loneliness. To die alone, only to suffer alone in the afterlife, is a fate that very few people deserve, and despite all the atrocities she committed, I'm not so sure she's one of those people. Call me a sociopath, but I couldn't help but feel sorry for her when she broke down and began to cry after losing to Rose. And I know Resident Evil isn't a Sunday morning soap opera, but I was really hoping for a moment between the two girls. Two people whose lives were planned out long before they were born, all for the benefit of others. Nothing more than mere possessions put on display. So a calm interaction would have been interesting to see with Evelyn, a dark reflection of what Rose could be, finally get some sense of peace and belonging from the teenager, something she was denied in both life and death. Instead, the little girl simply lashes out in anger and forcing Rose to escape, cutting off any chances to make at least one friend, leaving her in the dark depths of self-destructive depression. But when the dust clears and all she hears is the suffocating silence around her, she'll soon regret her actions because she's completely and utterly alone, with misery being her only sense of company. But despite their shared connection through the mode, Rose's predicament also reminds me of Sherry Birkin from RE2 and RE6. Even though she wasn't born with life-changing mutations, she was still the daughter of two scientists who worked for Umbrella, and for simply being born to the wrong people, she paid a hefty price when she was infected with a virus that killed thousands of people and led to a citywide nuke. The same virus that her own parents created. Not something to brag about during career day at school. Luckily, with Claire Redfield's help, she was cured while escaping Raccoon City's tragic demise, and though she survived, I'm sure she had to come to terms with what her parents had done. All those innocent people, their lives snatched away from them like a thief in the night. The survivor's guilt alone could have pushed her over the edge of devastating self-deprecation and a mental breakdown. Instead, when you see her again in RE6, she puts the past behind her by constantly risking her life to rid the world of bioterrorism as a government agent. A complete 180 of what her parents were doing. And thanks to that infection as a kid, she was given superhuman regeneration, allowing her to keep moving forward no matter how dangerous things get. So, in a way, her traumatic past is giving others a safer future. And I believe that alone helps her get out of bed every morning, hoping to make a difference to someone, somewhere around the world. Before she became an agent though, Sherry spent most of her childhood within government custody, completely isolated from society due to her condition. So she didn't have the luxury of being bullied growing up, and so her and Rose had very opposite upbringings, shaping them completely different from each other. But they both had to answer for the sins of their parents through horrific hardships, and in the end, would have to define themselves as they carve out their future. I'm not saying Rose has to join Chris's crusade on war and terrorism. But as long as she comes to terms with her painful paranormal past and accept herself for who she is, it wouldn't bother me if she went on to live a normal life, perhaps getting a regular 9 to 5 like her dad did before he got wrapped up in that never-ending nightmare. In a way, that would make everything come around full circle. But with her potential, it'd be nice to see her help save the world from a life-ending virus every now and again. But regardless of that, just as Evelyn is what Rose could be if she gave into her emotions and became the monster everyone expects to see, Sherry is that small glimmer of light you see at the end of the tunnel, a shining example of not letting others determine your life. And you see it finally take shape when Rose breaks the purifying crystal, the sole reason she went through this hellish nightmare in the first place, barely escaping death over and over again to rid herself of the powers that kept her locked away in a painful prison of her past. And just before she breaks free from all of it, all the struggles and sacrifices needed for this very moment shatters within mere seconds. In order to save her dad from Mother Miranda, the same man who saved her all those years ago, finally returned the favor. As her powers manifest around her, she finally comes to terms with who and what she is, Rose Winters. Someone like you and I who's trying to find their place in the world. Nothing more, nothing less. Unlike her supernatural birth, her main problem is not a rare occurrence. And whether or not you like Rose as a character, the majority of us experience that same dilemma of questioning our beginnings and what's expected of us, all while trying not to let that define who we are, as we endure our fears and insecurities laid on by those around. And sometimes, the hardest part of the journey is not blaming ourselves for our shortcomings that many people are too eager to remind us of.
So much power! You truly would have been the perfect vessel for my Eva!
I'm not a goddamn vessel. I'm not some stupid copy. I'm me, Rose. And you're done.
I do apologize for this video being shorter than the others, but unlike Ethan and Mia, of whom we spent 2 games with, we only spent 3 to 4 hours with Rose, and you can only get but so much from a short period of time. With that said, I would like to see her in future games, because I think there's a lot more to her than what we've seen so far. But time will tell. Resident Evil isn't particularly predictable with their storytelling. But share with us your opinions on Rose Winters. Is she someone you'd like to see again in the future? Do you prefer the more classic characters? Or would you like a new story with a new protagonist altogether? And as always, thank you so much for watching, and please, feel free to like, subscribe, and join the discussion. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.